Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm so excited for season 2 and the great guests you're going to hear from, their struggles, how they overcame their struggles, their triumphs. Through personal and business life, I think they're tied together, and we're going to share great stories about that. This show isn't just about me. It takes a lot of good people working with me. Among them is my partner, H7 Network, and Clay Hicks. Building relationships, building community is the mission of H7 Network. They want to create a network of champions where everybody wins. Find out more at h7network.com. And we hope to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you through our show. Enjoy the show. We'll talk to you on the other side. Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. And, we're all about serving and helping people. And down the road, a sales comes or income comes. And I've just been talking to my guest earlier, and I am so fired up. He's got something to help everybody out there, but he does it with a servant's heart. Hey, Rich, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
Oh, you're very welcome. Let's get into it. Let's get into some background. And, you were just telling me about just some certifications you did, which was incredible. But let's talk about what you're all about.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I've been a business advisor and spent, even before that, I've spent so much of my career having to either turn around businesses. I've worked for small businesses, large businesses, and really trying to get them in a position to, whether it's a turnaround or increase in value or whatever. And then I decided that I don't want to work for those businesses. I want to help as many of them as I can. So I became a business advisor, but then there's a large, arguably the largest transfer or transition of wealth in the history of our country is taking place in the next 10 years. Okay. And that's the baby boomers that are looking to retire and possibly selling their business. And I had a person reach out to me and said, Rich, we don't have business advisors that really are qualified or certified to go in and help evaluate a business and then also identify those areas that can drive the highest valuation. So I explored it further, went and got certified on it, and absolutely having a blast. And the amount of people that I can help, that I work and educate about how companies are evaluated, what drives the highest valuation, why should you do some initiatives versus the others, and to be able to help these people realize, a lifetime of work while also maximizing the results or the fruits of their labor for their family and setting legacies is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I love legacies. So let's walk through. I have a company that you're looking to help sell their company. You're going to be advising them the right way. So how do you get started with that?
So usually what ends up happening is there is a discussion that they may have, and it can happen from a lot of places. I had a business owner reach out to me a while back, and the wife nudged him and said, I'm tired, man. I'm ready to retire. So he reached out to some people that he knew, and he said, okay, I'm ready to sell my business. Well, we had a conversation, and I said, well, look, if you go to market today, this is what it'll look like. This is what you could expect. And obviously we got a reaction because most people, look at their own baby of their business, right, as a baby, and they say, well, wait a minute, it's worth a whole lot more than that. And my feedback is, well, it may be to you, but you're not looking at it from the buyer's perspective or the market. So then we talk, here are the kind of things they look for. Here's what the kind of buyers that are out there. Here are your options. You could sell it to internal. You could sell it to employees. You could sell it to third parties. But I said, can you wait another, say, couple of years? maybe 2 to 3 years. Let's put a plan together. And I showed them examples of if you sold it today, here's what you would get. If we go through some of these initiatives, then this is what it may look like. And when you're looking at 4 to 5 times the value of what it is today, that's then when you get the real conversation that says, yes, I want to start working, with someone like you or people that do what you do to better understand how to do that. So
I was listening to a podcast. Sorry to interrupt, but it's funny that we're doing this show because I listened to a podcast this morning. The guy called into the radio show and said, he's a contractor and my contractor boss wants to sell me the business. He's the manager.
Mm-hmm.
That's a perfect guy to go, I need Rich's help and he didn't know what the hell he's doing. And the guy was like, hey, you need to go find an advisor. So it's funny we're talking because he thought it was worth like $500,000. And the guy said, it's probably worth 2 or 2.5. And don't go to a bank and finance it because use the profits and that's what you do. I love that.
See, here's the scary part, Steve. This is part of why, and I love on your show and your theme of a servant's heart. So here's some really scary numbers. Okay. Business owners today, about 80% of their personal wealth is tied up in the business.
Wow.
Okay. So for the average employee, that goes to work 9 to 5, or, for those of us that are, 8 to 8 or whatever, they're more diversified, right? You may have 401k, you may, have your home, you may have some other investments or whatever, but a lot of business owners, 80% of their wealth is tied up in their business. All right, but here's the problem. Only about 30% of businesses, private businesses that are put up for sale actually sell. Now think about that. If 80% of your wealth was tied up in your business, but only 30% of the people out there, those businesses actually sell, which side of that are you on? Are you on the 70% that doesn't sell? Then what are you going to do? Well, here's where it gets worse. A lot of those that happens, they say, well, I'll just transfer it to my kids, next generation, right? Legacy. Here's the problem. Only about 20% of the companies that transfer to the next generation sustain longer term. So it's a really scary number. And that's the thing I taught with the business owners is you don't have to say today, oh, I'm tired. I woke up this morning. I want to sell my company. You just need to start thinking about it and then say, okay, learn what drives the value of a company. And then over time, you can build your company in such a way that it is ready. The worst thing that happens is to wake up one day and say, I'm tired, I'm done, and then immediately go to either a business broker or an M&A kind of guy and say, I want to sell my company, because then you fall within that, you may fall within that 70% that doesn't sell if you really don't know what drives, sales in the market.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned legacy because that's got to be a hard issue. Here I'm a father and I'm going to give it to my son who may never have worked at the company or just did manager position. I just gave him a job to do it. Do you go through and see if this potential takeover of this person is worthwhile to put in that position?
I get into that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. That's part of what I do is I may go into a family business, work with the owner, and I have hard conversations with them. I'll evaluate the kids that are in the, and I'm using kids and maybe the bad term, but the children that are in the business. I'll give them personality assessments. I'll sit down and interview them. I'll talk to them. And I'll really evaluate back for the owner what kind of risks they may have. And I say, if you transition it to them today, you're carrying a lot of risk. Now, let's do this. And I'll put together a plan for them. And I'll say, for example, let's talk about what a job description would look like for the CEO of this company. Okay, boom. Then we find a way or we crank one out. Then I'll say, all right, let's evaluate, say, your son or daughter. What's the gap between the two? If we can find a way to close that gap, then yes, it would be a great move to transition it over. But if that gap is too broad, or they're not the right fit, or the other part, I ask them, do you want to take over the company? They'll say yes. And then I'll ask them the follow up. Tell me why. Right? Because what a lot of them nowadays, they look at the success that the parents have had and they say, I want that success. But then the second they're in the hot seat and they have to make all the hard decisions and get called late at night and, have all kind of the problems and et cetera, are they prepared well enough to do it? And if that chasm is too wide, I'll recommend to the business owner, listen, do not turn your business over to the point that it goes down the tubes. Hire somebody from the outside to come in. Hire an operator, hire a president. Let your kids have a percent of the company, but get a professional to run it so that it still runs and maintains and generates a lifetime of income for your family and for your kids.
That's a serving mood, Rich. Move. If you said, hey, your son Joey is not going to be a fit, never hire him. You instead meld it together like, hey, let's bring Steve Ramone, the expert who's done this job. Let them run it. They could still be owners, still get a piece of the pie, still be there if they want to be. You're off vacation, semi-retirement or full retirement, but your baby that you've been, because I would think that's a problem. These guys have 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years in a business. It's like their baby. Yeah. They're not going to, right? That's why they overvalue it.
Well, and it is. I'll give you a few examples of, because things that come up a lot of times, you'll talk with a business owner and they'll say, my business generates really good income. For example, it may generate, let's say, $500,000 EBITDA a year, million EBITDA, whatever the number is. Okay. And then I'll go in and start really looking at it and said, okay, and here's sort of it's not too far of an extreme example, but I think something the listeners could relate to is I may go in and after I've done my assessment and my analysis of it, I may come back and say, frankly, your company won't sell. And they're shocked. And I say, but here's why. Hear me out, because this will then make sense. Number one, Mr. Business Owner, as you said, Steve, you've been in the business running this thing for the last 30 years. All of the top line relationships with your primary customers are through you. So you may have somebody in the sales role, but at the end of the day, if you left, those customers are going to leave. No buyer is going to buy into a company if there's a risk of all their customers leaving. Another example is customer concentration. You've got a great income and a great business going, but your top 2 or 3 customers drive 50% of your revenue. A buyer's not going to take that, because what if they had the relationship with the owner leaves, and then they're like, it's no longer his company.
Yeah,
I'm going to go to the competition.
Yeah.
So things like that can greatly impact. And then what I do is bring it up to them and say, okay, now we got a time frame. Number one, we got to get the business running in such a way that you can go and take a week and then take 2 weeks off. And then what happens if you take 90 days off? And at that point, not only can the business run without the owner, but it sends a message to potential buyers to say, okay, my risk is minimized. And, we start working at customers, the same thing. Once you find out that, hey, your high concentration is so much, then you say, all right, what about different product lines? Or how do you get other customers? So diversify.
Yeah, interesting.
And a lot of people are not aware how things like that drive so much of the value for investors. Or other ways like you don't have to sell the entire company. You can sell a piece of it, and get enough of income to say, take chips off the table, let you and your spouse go ahead and retire or semi-retire, but you still have enough ownership in the company. And with that investment money, it grows even further. So even though you may own a smaller percent than you did before, the growth of the company may be even more. So there's a lot of options out there that a lot of times people are just not aware of.
Well, that's not their job, though. See, that's the thing is what you do is I'm a business owner. I own a plumbing company. It does 50 million. I mean, it's 20 companies. Let's say it's just a massive company. I know how to run a plumbing company.
Yes.
But it's no different than selling a car. You got a car to sell. I mean, you got to go to a broker. I mean, in case you wouldn't, but you got to go to somebody who knows how to sell a car. I wouldn't know how to do it. I don't even know what's in the engine, right?
Yeah. You know, what kills me is the home sale analogy.
Okay. Yeah.
All kidding aside, people, relatively speaking, spend more time preparing their home for sale than they do preparing their business for sale.
Wow.
Relative speaking on value and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, part of the things that just the average businessman, like you said, the guy that runs and owns the plumbing company, he doesn't know all of this stuff. So you get in and you have a good conversation, and it doesn't cost anything to have a good conversation.
Right.
And then what you do is part of that analysis, like that I may do, is say, well, I can tell you the companies like yours that have sold during this time frame in these kind of markets, and here's what they sold for. And you can get a range in there, and you can say, you know, based on what I'm seeing, this is where you come in today. But guess what? If we did these things over this time frame, wow, man, you'd come in on the upper end. And then when you see it and see those numbers, then that can be life-changing. But if you don't know about it, you're just the guy that says, hey, I've got a good company, and I just woke up one day and said, you know, I'm ready to retire. So let's call a broker, or let's call an M&A guy and sell my company.
Because that's what they know. Right. Just like a real estate broker, same thing. You go right there and, you know, sell for less, make less money, but they would desperate to get out. So let's talk about this scenario. I need to get out. I'm hitting 61. I've been doing this since I'm 20. I'm 41 years into it. It's pulling a million years at it, but I just need to get out, Rich. So you could work with somebody like that.
Yes. Yes. Usually I'm not the business broker themselves that would actually market the company, do the negotiating. There's professionals that do that, and that's what they do every day. What I do is I can go in and sit down and have an honest conversation with them and say, all right, these are the things, here's what the process you would be looking at. Okay. These are the things that a buyer is going to look at, and let's have some choices here. Do you want to spend, 90 days, 180 days to address some of these things, or are you just done now? And if they say, hey, I'm pretty much done now, then I can look at it and say, all right, well, based on everything that I see and my analysis and all that kind of stuff, here's about what you can expect. And then that gives them some good, at least information going into the selling process.
Broker deal. Yeah. M&A or broker. Yeah. Yeah. And I like that because you give them options. You don't tell them, hey, keep it for 2 years. The guy's like done. He's done.
Yeah.
So you throw the options out there so he can make that decision.
Yeah.
To help him. And that's great.
And it's, I put myself, in their shoes.
Yeah.
And I know you get up in your, you get in your 60s, you may be tired and worn out, but I also go back to that early conversation. If 80% of your wealth is tied in the business, but only 30% of these businesses sell, what are you going to do if you're in your, say, low 60s and your business doesn't sell? I mean, that can be catastrophic for your family.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, and I'll give time frames, usually to sell a company takes about a year. Okay. So you go through the process, you got to get all your financials, you got to get ready for your due diligence and all that. And then you contact your brokers or, whoever's going to help you, and your investment people and the attorneys and all that kind of process. Going through what I call this value acceleration piece, meaning do the analysis and then identify those areas that drive the highest value. And then the way that that works is we do 90-day sprints. So let's pick out the top 4 or 5 things that we can get accomplished in the next 90 days. And then let's evaluate. Does that increase the value to the point that says, yeah, that closes my gap, I'm ready to sell? If not, let's do another 90. But you're not doing long-term strategic stuff.
Yeah.
Because eventually people get tired of that. They don't see the value coming back. They get tired and they say, all right, I'm done, I'm sell. But if you can do every 90 days, look at it, and then look at it, and then finally come back and say, okay, yeah, I'm all right with this number that we're seeing and where it's at. Bam. Then you slide over to the selling process, and you're prepared for it, and the company is.
Yeah.
That's the best path to go down.
This would work in any industry, correct? Doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter. The fundamentals are the same. It doesn't matter in the industry. And here's the thing too. You don't have to be ready to sell your company to start the process. What I promote is educate yourself over what the process is and what buyers look for when buying a company. And if you know what that is, then you can start running your company that way. And guess what will happen? Your profits will start going up. Yes. EBITDA, which is one of the top, financial tools that are used, are the measurements that are used. Then those things about your multiples will go up. And and then when both of those go up, you're starting to see exponential increases in the value of your company.
And that's when that's where you get your biggest bang for your buck.
You do. And the difference with a lot of companies is that if you don't know that and you don't run your company that way, it may be what they call is a lifestyle business. It's a good lifestyle business. Hey, it provides me and my family a lot of good money. Okay, well, guess what, too? You got 3 of your kids on the payroll or relatives. They basically don't do a whole lot. So they're dragging the profitability down. Could they survive? Could the company survive without them? Or you may be overpaying for a particular role because of that's just who this person is. So when you look at it and see, well, wait a minute, if the buyers are looking at this kind of stuff, then shouldn't I be as well? And then just start running it fundamentally sound. And you could be expecting to retire 10 years from now. This is not something that you initiate or do just because you're ready tomorrow to hang it up. It's just some pretty good fundamentals. But like we said, if you don't know what to look for or what buyers look for, then you're going to do the best you can. You're going to run the best plumbing company possible. But when it comes time to sell, you may not max it out.
Can you work with a company that's losing money?
Yeah, of course. But what I do pretty rapidly, I work very fast because, again, I don't want them paying me if they're already hurting, I don't drag things out, man. If I can have a conversation real quick and give them some bullet points without taking any money, I'm fine with that because, again, they're trying to build their company, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But what I do pretty rapidly is put in black and white why they're losing money. Because a lot of times it may not be obvious to them. And then I'll work with them to come up with some ideas or others that they can speak to help turn this thing around, very fast. Yeah. And then at that point, once you get on the right track or the right path forward, then you start getting a lot of this positive momentum going.
Love that. And that's what serving's all about, is building that energy. Yeah. And I love that you do that because I know other business coaches that I've talked to that said, hey, if you're losing money, you're not a fit to my business, but you're willing to try to help as many people as you can, even if they are losing money. Yes.
Well, and because, I've been in businesses. I've been brought into businesses before I started doing what I'm doing now to basically do turnarounds. And I've done it for family-owned businesses that were losing a ton of money, but we had really rapid turnarounds. And examples of rapid turnarounds, maybe they could be so locked into a particular market that they don't realize that the product or service they provide is highly applicable to, say, a complementary market. Or they may sell it through a third party, but what if you go direct to the end customer? There's a lot of scenarios that they don't think about just because they've been set in their own ways. When you turn it around and go down a different path, then you may have some rapid, turnarounds or getting, losing money to making money. And then at that point, it may be, okay, well, you're going down the right path. You don't need me right now. We're going down the right. Let's touch base in 3 months, 6 months. If I can help you, great. If not, reach out, because there may be guys like Steve who would be the better person to work with, as an example.
I love that. Again, you're not trying to take their money. You'll take it when they can do it. And that's not the way the world works right now, unfortunately. No. But that's okay. That's why we're here on this podcast, to do this serving. When you work with the company, do you usually work with the founder, CEO?
Usually it's the founder, CEO, the owners, or something like that. They're the sponsors. They're the ones that's got to come back and say, I support this, right? But then quite often it will drive a little bit deeper in the organization. Yeah. But they've got to be serious, because a lot of times these things do require changes within the company. And if it's not sponsored at the top, then nothing gets accomplished, right?
Oh, black hole.
And if I'm not going to go into a company and take their money if I know for sure that, the next level down, whether it's a family member that doesn't agree with the path we're going on or whatever, and they're not going to support it, I'm like, listen, I can't be effective. I'm not going to take your money. Do what you need to do.
All in or don't do it at all. I like that. Is there any size company that you work with that you prefer, or?
Honestly, smaller companies, I don't mind working with smaller. So let me give you ranges or type ideas or et cetera.
Great.
I've worked with companies smaller than, say, 2 million, but usually anything less than that, they either can't afford me or can't afford some of the niche. They're just trying to pay the bills, right? So I'm not going to be a magic wand to come on with that.
Yeah.
Probably upper end, 100 million, something along that path. Once you get above a certain, dollar amount in there, then, the dynamics change a good bit. And I may not be the best fit for that, but small to medium-sized businesses are right in the sweet spot.
No, and I like that, because we can't help everybody. It's just unfortunate. Just doesn't work that way in the world. Well, let's do a shout out, because I know there's people that know business owners, probably somebody listening, like you said earlier, is like, man, I didn't think about selling my business. I need to talk to Rich. So how can they get a hold of you?
A couple of things. Love to, my website is, my company name is richhallgroup.com, or my website is, my company is Rich Hall Group. I'm on LinkedIn. Look me up on there. Would love to connect. That's a good way of having a conversation. And, again, it doesn't cost anything to talk. And when you meet really good people, we try to find ways to help as many people as we can.
So, Rich, I'm going to get crazy here. It's going to cost me. So the first 2 people that reach out to you, Rich, I'm going to send them a gift in the mail.
Uh-oh.
Because what you're doing is, I have a friend that's an M&A, and he does some of this, but I'm going to definitely refer you to him. But this is such an emotional advice. I mean, like you said, 20, 30 years, you got a wife, you've got kids, you've got a manager's been with you 20, you got all this, because I've shut a business down. We sold a business. I didn't personally, my cousin did. We sold a health club. And it was emotional. And 22 years in, it was, and they came and gave us he did a great job negotiating, but it's emotional. So you kind of have to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist a little bit, a mental person.
It can be tough. And the thing you mentioned, for example, like M&A or wealth advisors,
Mm-hmm.
I work directly with them because the wealth advisors, for example, or the financial advisors for the family or the owners, they're the ones that'll come up and say, okay, you want to retire. Here's how much money you're going to need based on what you've told me. And then they'll look at them and say, well, we don't have that much. Most of our wealth is tied up in the business. Okay, then you need to call Rich because Rich can help you identify what the value is and then what you need to do to close the gap so that your company does meet that number. The M&A guys, again, those are the ones that I work with when I hand over a business and say, all right, this one's ready. This is the right, I know M&A people. These are the right people you should speak with. Now, conversely, if an M&A company, their job is to sell that business, right? But if they look at it and they know that, listen, this thing is not ready, the odds of selling it anywhere close to what the owner wants is not going to happen. Okay. Ethical ones will turn around and say, you need to contact somebody like Rich, somebody that can help you get your company prepared and get it where it needs to be. Unethical out there may say, all right, we're going to go ahead and try to sell it for whatever it is because we get paid based on the transaction of selling.
Yeah.
And those are tragic for the families that rely on this for their long-term, income. And again, I love having conversations. I love educating people over the process. And then if they fit in the mode that says, yeah, I'm ready to have, the conversation, then we can go and see if I can help them or not.
You're a smart guy, Rich, a really smart guy. I'm going to try to spoof you a little bit here. Can you work with a father passes away, he owns a company, now it goes into a trust. The people in the beneficiaries say, we want nothing to do with the business. Would you be a great connection for them?
There's a lot of complications, things obviously that you just put out there. One of the biggest concerns or issues is when a primary owner of a company goes through it could be death. Yeah. I call them the 5 Ds. It could go through death, divorce. That's one of the big things that people don't, I put something on LinkedIn a few days ago. There was an example of, you're a partner in a company and then all of a sudden you find out that your wife just filed for divorce. Okay, guess what? She's going after your half of the company. If she wins, then now part of the company owners is a very upset spouse. Okay, there's tools and methods to protect the company against something like that, buy-sell agreements, and just things that say in the event that something like this happened or happens, this is what takes place. That's the thing that I reference people to in advance, because if someone, like you say, your scenario, someone passes away, and then, number one, their will, depending on how it's written, may dictate what happens. Yeah. And if it doesn't mention going into a trust or, it just say, hey, all of my assets pass over to my wife. And if my wife's not there, pass over to my kids. Now you just got the ownership of the company goes to somebody that maybe hadn't even spent a day in the company. It's horrible.
Right. Or they want to sell. The wife gets it. It's worth $5 million. They'd rather take the cash and run. But you would be a good resource for that. Of course, probably work with a lawyer too, but with that wife, right?
I would be a good resource to have a good conversation.
Yeah.
Depending on the scenario would be whether or not
Gotcha.
I would say that I'm the right person. Usually in that scenario, you mentioned it, I would refer them to an estate attorney or something that could help the financially in a very short time frame of either if the wife just wants to get rid of it and run with the money, that's an example. Or yes, I could be one that come in and say, listen, if you sell it on a dime, I know you're in a tough situation. If you sell it right now, you're going to get pennies. Hire somebody to come in, hire a Steve, hire an operator, somebody to run the company. You got enough money, hire them to come in and run it. I can work with that person to help them, get up to speed very rapidly to run the company. And now you have maintained this valuable asset. You hadn't sold it on a fire sale. That's the tragedy.
Yeah. You proved me as your smart guy again, because I didn't think about all that. But that's where you can help. And then down the road, when they're ready to sell, they come back, go, hey, let's do one more audit. Are we ready? We did this, this, and this. Yeah, here. And your value is with all that. And when it's ready to sell, you eat, now, or wait 6 more months or 90 days, like you said, sprint.
Yeah.
I like that, because it's an emotional divorce or death, or very emotional. Now you throw a business in it. You're right. It could be a muck.
Yes, it's and there's all kinds of things like that can happen: death, divorce, disease. Think about if you were the owner of a company and you came down with a debilitating disease. You didn't die yet, so a lot of this stuff didn't kick in. You didn't go through a divorce, but you're taken offline. What are your, things that can occur? And, hey, thanks for giving me credit. I'm not that smart. Okay. But I have been through a heck of a lot and got a lot of experience. And what I see is during those types of situations, somebody just needs somebody to talk to, to say, hey, everybody calm down. It's okay. Here are some options you may not have thought about, and you can get through this, but don't make a rash decision, because the market out there will smell it. And it may be a fire sale. And if it does, this lifelong asset that you've worked 20, 30, 40 years to create may not bring anywhere close. And we can help you get over that hump.
Okay, we're running out of time, and this could go for hours. What are the 5 Ds? What are the other? Tell me all the 5 Ds. I'm very interested.
Well, you got death, divorce, distress.
Okay.
Is another one. Distress meaning, I'm worn out, disease. And I know you put me on the spot, man. What's the 5th one? All right, I'll get to you on that one. You got me on the spot.
Yeah, no, that's it. And we'll put it in the show notes too, because I think that's important. I didn't know the stress. I didn't think about the first 3 I did, but that's important. Well, Rich, I want to thank you for being on the show. You really proved what a servant can do at a high level. You work with a $100 million company, you can still serve.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's a $2 million company, you can still serve. And that's good to know, because people get scared when these companies are so big with so many employees and so much money. It still can be done right. You just need the direction. So with that being said, thanks again. God bless you for what you're doing. Can I ask one more favor?
Absolutely.
Can you give a little piece of advice to my audience on their journey in life and in business?
I'll tell you what's driven me is, number one, I'm a very strong faith-based person. So I always put faith as a priority. Right behind that is family. Man, never let a company or business or something like that take the priority over your family. And then, after that, the things that we're talking about are just plan ahead, educate yourself, prepare for it. And then you will go into these type difficult situations in the best place possible.